Good day. In this video lesson, I'm going to discuss the topic which is the research gap in relation to your academic research. What is a research gap? A research gap is a question or a problem that has not been answered by any of the existing studies or something to be filled in. Remember that this is the second step after choosing your topic. You have to find the research gap. Now, how you will identify the research gap? The first thing that you need to do or you have to do is to conduct a literature review. What is this literature review? The old research literature gives an idea for gaps in the research report. It can be found under the topics like scope and limitation, suggestions that mention the gaps left over by the earlier research. Second one, in discussion with the research colleagues, research guides, or advisors, you may get an inspirational research area that might be unexplored. Thus, the new research gap. Third, several research areas can be found on digital platforms like social media, research-related websites, or even the magazine and journals. Give an idea that could be picked up or modified as per the scope and limitation for the new research gap. Fourth, a few commercial or social activity-based organization focus a lot on problem-solving areas. They also keep writing and mentioning the social issues in their newsletters or they put it on their public domain, such articles. Okay? You have to also to read different articles which is related to your topic. Such articles are excellent sources of real social issues on which a research gap could be identified. Fifth, the most cited research articles on research papers may give a clue on the inspiring and motivating research gaps for you. This helps with the understanding of current topics among the other researchers and identify the gaps in the research work. Six, asking proper question to the theoretical areas, samples used for the data collection, research methodology, objectives of the research, application of research findings, and the conclusion of inspiring research. Work was done recently or very old research work can provide research gap. Meaning to say, if the research, because one of the characteristic of the quantitative research, it can be replicated. Uh, the research, the academic research study already outdated, then that will be already your research gaps. Say the research was conducted during 2001. Okay, you can use that as the research gap. Okay, we have different types of research gap. The first one, we have the evidence gap or the contradictory evidence gap. Results from studies allow for conclusions in their own right but are contradictory when examined from a more abstract point of view. Okay, here, the strategy example and write-up of evidence gap. By the way, class, the research gap is very important. If your professor didn't see this in your background of the study, automatically or eventually, your professor will return your paper. If your professor didn't see this research gap in your background of the study. Okay, on the evidence gap or contradictory gap, we have the strategy example and write-up evidence gap. Okay, example, the researcher identified an apparent evidence gap in the prior research concerning academic performance of the students. You have to cite uh, three citation or you have to give a citation from the previous which is contradictory to the prior. meaning class, the prior and the previous don't have a same findings. The first one saying like this, then you read a you read for instance you read a academic research, then at least uh, meaning to say there is there is a conflict. The first one saying like this, the second one is saying like this, which is different to the first one that you read. Meaning to say, you can use already that as research gap. The first, okay, this is the example. The researcher identified an apparent evidence gap in the prior research concerning academic performance of the students. You have to cite a recitation from the previous research has addressed several aspects of intellectual capacity. Okay, this one citation, Ming 2018, school performances, academic achievements are influenced by intellectual capacity and therefore is of public health significance. Second one, moreover, average students having high IQ scores do better on school grades, perform better on standardized tests, and complete more years of education. Yang 2017. The third one, and Lee et al. 2017 reported that the students' academic performance relies more strongly on their cognitive abilities through all grade levels through all grade levels. However, the previous research has not addressed several contradictions in the findings concerning the prior research. Based on the literature review, researchers has identified that there is an evidence gap in the prior studies that are contradictory in the findings. Meaning to say, class, this one, the prior research, the findings is not similar to the previous, then you can use that as your research gap. And remember the line, this one, based on the literature review, the researcher has identified there's an evidence gap in the prior studies that are contradictory in the findings. Once your professor show that in your background of this study, meaning to say that your professor will accept your research, academic research, or your professor will accept your proposal. Okay, that is the evidence gap. The second one, we have the knowledge gap. The knowledge gap is common gap in the prior research. There are two settings where knowledge void might occur. The first one, first knowledge may not exist in the actual field to theories and literature from related research domains. Second, it might be the case that the results of a study differs from what was expected. Meaning to say, class, there is an offshoot. Remember the term, there is an offshoot. Offshoot. Okay? This is the strategy example and write-up. The researcher identified an apparent knowledge gap in the prior research concerning on the derivation of formula in physical science. In addition, the prior research did not address the subject of law of equality. This encompasses several unexplored dimensions that lately have attracted research attention in other disciplines. Okay, in mathematics, equality is a relationship between two quantities or more generally two mathematical expressions asserting that the quantities have the same value or the expression represents same mathematical object. Wikipedia 2015. The skill on solving equality should be explored further to provide an understanding as to why such results in the study differs from what was expected. Okay? Remember the last term? The skill on solving equality should be explored further to provide an understanding as to why such results, delete this one, such results of the study differs from what was expected. Meaning to say, class, you are conducting a, for instance, conducting exam which is uh, more on derivation of formula in physical science. Now, see, once na you already showed different examples, but when the students do that on their own, you figure out that they cannot derive the formula. Meaning to say, there is an offshoot. If you cannot derive formula, mathematical formula in physical science, in chemistry, if you cannot derive formula class, meaning to say, you don't understand the law of equality. Okay? Therefore, that is an offshoot. You can conduct a research. That is already the research gap. You can conduct a research which is uh, in mathematics, other discipline, a research about the law of equality. Okay, that is the offshoot. Sometimes it also happen in class that, for instance, you have the you are trying to figure out the result of the exam of the students in adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing rational expression. Now, when it comes to their output, you figure out that all of the item having a in fraction form, all of most of them are uh, incorrect there. Therefore, that is an offshoot. You will conduct a research which is uh, in relation to the fraction. Okay, that is the offshoot. Next, practical knowledge gap. This kind of gap tends to be discrepancy that can motivate new research. In this direction, a practical knowledge or action knowledge conflict arises when the actual behavior of professional is different from their advocated behavior. In this case, research could seek to determine the scope of the conflict and to uncover the reasons of its existence. Say, uh, I will give you example na say the person conducted the research, which is the profession of the researcher, say nurse. They conduct a research on the in the field of education, meaning to say class, you can use that as a research gap. Do you get me? Meaning to say, that is not his field. The person is nurse but trying to conduct a research in the field of education. Meaning to say, we can say that maybe the researcher will not do the rigorous research, or because when it comes to the field, he is not very passionate because he is a nurse trying to conduct a research on the field of education. Another, if you will also see, na always trying to upgrade the curriculum, always conducting a research about curriculum, then you can do also a research about on the teaching pedagogy. Okay, strategy example and write up. There appears to be a practical knowledge gap in the prior research. There is a lack of rigorous research in the prior literature. Some of these unexplored skills appear to be lacking in the practice of professional teachers. The field of education is ripe for an investigation of practical focus research on the teachers, teaching pedagogy. Many of the prior studies focus on the curriculum in the field of education. However, okay, remember this term. However, there are few practical studies or action research in the field. This is an important and worthy of investigation in the context of teaching and learning process. An investigation of these issues is important because it will help diverse students to learn strategically. Once your professor saw that, in your proposal or in your background of study. Therefore, it is very strong that or very accepted because you conduct your research having a research gap. Next, methodological gap is the type of gap that deals with the conflict that occurs due to the influence methodology on a research result. This gap addresses the conflicts with the research methods in the prior studies and offers a new line of research that is divergent from those research methods. It is noted that it might be useful to vary research methods, especially if certain research topics have been mainly explored using singular or common method. Example, from qualitative method, okay, you can use that qualitative method as your research gap, turning that into quantitative method. You get me? Okay? Qualitative method, then you can use the quantitative method. Or if it is only descriptive method, you can use the uh, multiple design, say descriptive correlation, descriptive ex post facto. You can use two method to design in quantitative, then forming a multiple design. From descriptive, turning that to multiple design. From qualitative, turning that into quantitative. Okay, we call that methodological gap. You can use that class as the research gap. Then, strategy example in the write-up, the researcher identified the methodological gap in the prior research. There is a lack of blank research designs in blank. Based on the research we are trying to implement as a research design, we found there is a dirt in the prior research on blank research designs. In this study, okay, take a look in this one. In this study, we seek to establish a new inquiry on research design with blank. We seek to extend blank the research by addressing the gaps with blank in the research methodologies with blank. Okay, in your proposal, again, proposal, background of the study, once your professor saw that, it is very acceptable. Next, empirical gap. Empirical gap is the type of gap that deals with the gaps in the prior research. This conflict deals with the research findings or proposition need to be evaluated or empirically verified. For example, the empirical gap often addresses conflicts that no study to date has directly attempted to evaluate a subject or topic from an empirical approach. When it comes to proposition class, you can use this proposition, for instance, na uh, for instance, graduate students are more productive than to those undergrad students. Okay? You can use that proposition in order for you to create a research gap. Kumbaga you are trying to, because that is already implemented as proposition. Uh, it is common that we are trying to say always in the society that those people who graduated are more productive to the students which is undergrad. You can use that as your research gap. Strategy example in the write-up, there is appears to be empirical gap in the prior research. There is a lack of rigorous research in the prior literature. Some of these unexplored blank appear to be important and worthy of investigation in the context of blank. An empirical investigation of these issues is important because blank. Furthermore, okay, this one, furthermore, previous research has focused primarily on qualitative research concerning on blank. No study to date has directly attempted to empirically evaluate the blank. Then, very little empirical research has been done on the blank. Okay? Always concerning on the proposition. Okay, theoretical gap. In theoretical gap is the type of gap that deals with the gaps in theory with the prior research. For example, if one phenomena is being explained through various theoretical models, similar to methodological gap conflict, there might be theoretical conflict. Research and scholars could examine whether one of those theories is superior in terms of gap in the prior research. Theoretical gaps are a common occurrence in examining prior research on the phenomena. Meaning to say, you notice that the theoretical gap used in that research is very weak, then you have something in your mind which is very appropriate, then you can use that as your research gap. For instance, class, use the implementation of the face-to-face learning curriculum, limited face-to-face learning curriculum in low-risk area amid the pandemic. That implementation, the theoretical framework used there were the on the UNESCO. But of course, there is something which is you can use, which is stronger than to the UNESCO. It is the stakeholder consent, or the stakeholder is the heart of all activities in the school. That is your Chure, which is different from the UNESCO. Okay, this is the strategy and example write-up. Population gap is a common gap recognized among research. There are always underserved population that have been under-researched. This gap is the type of research regarding the population that is not adequately represented or under research in the evidence base or prior research. Example, gender, race, ethnicity, age, and ethnic. Example of this, for instance, the researcher conducting only on the inside the school, which is only for grade 7 and 8. Now you can use that class. You can find this in the scope and limitation. You can use that as your research gap. You can also do for grade 9 and 10. You can do also for grade 11 and 12. That will be your research gap because the prior research conducted the research only for grade 7 and 8. That is already a research gap because the researcher did not include the grade 9 and 10. Most of this class, you can find that in the scope and limitation. Okay, this is the strategy example and the write-up. Very little research has been done on. Furthermore, previous research has focused primarily on this population of grade 7 and 8. Very little research has been done on grade 9 and 10. That will be your research gap. Okay, other phrases that might help you identify or form a gap statement are has or have not been studied, reported, elucidated, is required, slash needed, is needed. The key question remains. It is important to address. That those are once you use that phrases, once you use that, meaning to say you are doing a research gap. Okay, this is our references. Okay, thank you and good day.